Darkside Podcast.
Hi, and welcome. Bruce Swartz here. This is the Darkside Podcast. We talk about dark subjects, controversial subjects, and we talk about the unknown. One, Darpa, a very mysterious company, a defense association inside of the United States that has been there since 1958. That's right. A lot longer than I thought that they were around. Like, I literally thought they were like brand new from the year 2000, but they're not. This is going to be an interesting podcast. Of course, if you've ever heard of theblackvault.com, there are over 3 million documents there, government documents and files that were both leaked and or declassified for the public, either through the Freedom of Information Act or it was leaked, right? So these wind up on a site where you have to look through these files because they're not advertising this or broadcasting this on mainstream media. So DARPA. What is DARPA? DARPA is the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. So what are the purposes of DARPA? I'm going to start off with a brief understanding of what this agency is and what branch this agency is branching out from. The Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, was established in 1958. It's an agency that is within the Department of Defense, DoD, responsible for catalyzing the development of technologies that maintain and advance the capabilities and technical superiority of the U.S. military. What DARPA is working on basically right now is the DARPA Sigma Plus program that's developing networked sensors that will detect a variety of chemical, biological, and explosive threats. Some of this research has tilted to addressing the COVID-19 pandemic. Is DARPA part of the CIA? The CIA is part of the intelligence community, and DARPA is an element of the Department of Defense. The organizations have different operating authorities and missions. So a few things that DARPA did invent, one of them is Siri. Yes, that Siri, Apple's digital virtual assistant, started life as a DARPA project way back in the early 2000s, not that long ago. Known as CALO, C-A-L-O, ostensibly an acronym for Cognitive Assistant that learns and organizes, CALO, but also a nod to the Latin word for a soldier's servant. So some files appeared on theblackvault.com about DARPA mind control project. We say that MK Ultra finished back in the 70s and that they destroyed 20 to 30,000 files, when in reality it's not finished. I could say something as brief or as silly as Britney Spears. Britney Spears herself admits to being or to have been in these MK Ultra mind controlling programs. So DARPA has been around since 1958. Can only imagine what they've been doing, and this is just my opinion, behind the backs of everyone, as they've always done. All these branches of the U.S. military and government have always been keeping things from the public, obviously. A whistleblower reveals military mind control project that's being done at a major university, or it was revealed at this major university. What if the government, guys, could change people's moral beliefs or stop political dissent through remote control of people's brains? What do you think of that? You might say it sounds like science fiction, right? Well, a leaked document reveals that the U.S. government, through DARPA research, is very close to accomplishing just that. Activist Post was recently contacted by an anonymous whistleblower who worked on a secret ongoing mind control project for DARPA. The aim of the program is to remotely disrupt political dissent and extremism by employing transcranial magnetic stimulation, TMS, in tandem with sophisticated propaganda based on this technology. TMS stimulates the temporal lobe of the brain with electromagnetic fields. That is scary in itself, It's a frequency war we're in right now. We got the satellites that could be a part of this too. You know, back in the 70s, they were maybe doing these programs with devices in rooms, but now are they trying to broaden it? Do you get what I'm getting at? The 5G, the satellites, mind controlling, subliminal messaging in cartoons, back like it's always been. Back in the cartoons, you have subliminal messaging in paintings, in applications now online, in games for teenagers, television, from soap operas to documentaries. It's not hard to subliminally enter some type of message that will continually be transmitted to someone's cranial. This is transcranial magnetic stimulation. Think of it. They're trying to back engineer the human brain. If that's not scary enough for you, it sure is for me. So what is TMS exactly? TMS is supposedly anyways, I won't tell you what I think of the FDA, but it's an FDA-approved, non-invasive treatment, they say, even though there are side effects, for adults with depression. I could go through hundreds of Parkinson's, schizophrenia, so they say, and also for compulsive disorders. TMS uses magnetic energy to create an electrical current in your brain. The electrical current is narrowly targeted to stimulate the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, of course, which is implicated to depression and anxiety. Also, multiple studies have indicated that TMS is an effective treatment, they say, for major depressive disorder, but obsessive compulsive disorder and other psychiatric illnesses with low risk and minimal side effects. They keep saying the low risk and the minimal side effects, but if I scroll down here to see what are the risks and side effects of TMS, transcranial magnetic stimulation, can you think of it? Again, was approved by the FDA in 2008. The most common reported side effects, get ready for it. Let me know if you have any of these side effects now. Reported are mild scalp discomfort at the treatment site and headaches. These side effects usually subside after the first week of treatment and typically can be managed with over-the-counter pain relievers. Before there is a very small risk of seizure, because there is a very small risk of seizure, less than 1% in patients, should discuss any history of seizures with the psychiatrist before beginning the treatments. But if they're doing this through satellites and frequencies to everyone, is that why some people are going to have excessive seizures and they're just going to die off and no one's going to be responsible for it because nobody knows what's being done? And again, this is in my assuming that these satellites that we see up in the sky that are going to be used for this type of programming. See, back in the days, MK Ultra, there was less subjects. They did smaller group therapies, right? There were groups of less people. But now, as a whole, for the whole planet, if they're going to try to treat everyone or, send frequencies in the air, think of it, to control some, it could be good or bad, right? Like some people will say, well, maybe they're trying to control the aggressive people. For me, it's all bad news. For me, they're playing God and they're manipulating their unique goal. Their sole goal is to manipulate our soul, to change our DNA, to take away our immunity. It's ridiculous. We saw that during the pandemic recently passing by. The truth is coming out now even in mainstream media. So I'm going to give you my honest opinion on this. Whether you believe it or not, whether you agree or disagree with it, well, I believe in free speech, right? Freedom of speech. All these programs that everyone thinks or may think, like they're telling us, that they're going to try to perfection the human race and to make the humans better. Behind my mind, actually the front of my cortex, frontal lobe, I'm thinking more that it started out by trying to heal and fix certain ailments or illnesses, maybe mental issues and illnesses, but don't ever forget what their unique goal has always been, the United States government, and especially the defense branches of the military and government. It's for their own good to use against the enemy, to be able to control their minds, to be able to, from their own country at home, through frequencies and subliminal advertising, which I believe is real, able to change a country's way of operating, to destroy its culture and its ways of life through subliminal messaging, through movies, and I can't say it enough. There's so many ways of controlling or trying to brainwash someone, and we've seen this in the declassified files of MK Ultra. It's real. Waterboarding in the States is legal, if I'm not mistaken. If I'm not mistaken, think of it: waterboarding, torture. The goal is uniquely this: to be able to be number one, to be able to control the minds of the enemies that they will capture, and to ask them questions to try to deprogram them or to reprogram them. It's very scary thinking that an association is hired by a government to do testing and experimentation on programming people's minds, to control the brain. They're back engineering the brain to be able to change it without physically touching you through frequencies. So an hour or 45 minutes of this stimuli therapy will give you mild headaches. Well, what if the satellites around the world were continually sending those pulses into your brain? Because transcranial magnetic stimuli is done through the skull. Activist Post was recently contacted by an anonymous whistleblower who worked on a secret ongoing mind control project for Darpa. The aim of this program, guys, is to remotely disrupt political dissent and extremism by employing transcranial magnetic stimulation, TMS, in tandem with sophisticated propaganda based on this technology. The program, conducted by the Center for Strategic Communications, is based at Arizona State University. The DARPA funding for this project can be confirmed on a website. The head of the project, Steve Corman, has worked extensively in the area of strategic communication as it applies to terrorism and extremism on what could be called the war of ideals. Corman's latest project, narrating the exit from Afghanistan, and his many presentations make it quite obvious that the mission is to shape the narrative and literally change people's minds. Lest one believe it will be contained to overseas extremists, we should keep in mind that the word extremist is increasingly used domestically. The dissenters of yesterday could easily become the terrorist sympathizers and supporters of political violence tomorrow, they say. This is scary stuff. This DARPA research brings about many ethical questions of dilemmas. Mainly, this research aims to literally induce or disrupt the operation of narratives within a human brain. In other words, this research aims to stop individuals from thinking certain ways and from thinking their thoughts, and to make others believe things they normally would never believe. This research has tremendous interrogation possibilities and could potentially be used to more successfully spread propaganda or stop political upheaval to an unsuspecting public. So do you think it's an advantage for the government to change the ideals of everyone? Even if they change 75% of everyone's perception, reality, in the entire world. They won't have to do any surveillance or arrest any other individual by doing research. All they're gonna have to do is receive phone calls of people working for the government subliminally, like a cult, without even knowing that you're inside of this realm, that they're controlling you. You still feel free. Right? I've always said we're slaves with benefits and weekends. Nothing has changed from thousands of years ago. There were slaves thousands of years ago. There are slaves today. There were black slaves. There were white slaves. There were slaves of all color. We're enslaved right now, as a matter of fact. So what is the advantage of the government to control the perception of everyone? They won't have to lift a finger. The people themselves, my neighbor, will come to my house to thrash me and to threaten me. And there'll be groups of people around my house because I'm disagreeing with the government. And that is how they're implicating themselves. You notice the government is more in the public now. We got at the Capitol on the 6th, come on, in the United States, where we can see some agents that are there doing this insurrection to cause people to do evil shit. Literally, this is why they were there. They're doing it through mind control. They're doing it through physical means also, by hiding and integrating themselves in the public. And it's all around us. I'm not paranoid here. I'm very serious with what I'm saying. It's all around us. We are here to be experimented on. We've always been experimented on. A lot of people they're okay with it because they say, hey, come on, Bruce, they're trying to better the human race. They're going to make us a lot better, you know? No, the goal is not to make anything better. The goal is to completely understand the human brain. So they're going to have to do tests on us to make us better over these past many years that we've seen, where they probably did heal some people. But again, the goal is to be able to unheal the people, to know exactly how to manipulate the brain to make someone evil when you want him evil, and to make someone nice, calm, and docile when you want him or her to be. Mind control, manipulation. So the Darpa mind control programs is basically, guys, a continuation of the MK Ultra programs. In the case of communism, the American Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, which was founded in 1947, they believed that they had found the smoking gun. There was a technique used, guys, back in the days in China and North Korea, communist jails, and concentration camps also, against arrested Western missionaries and later American prisoners of war, captured during, obviously, the Korean War. American psychiatrists and psychologists such as Robert J. Lifton and Edgar Schein were asked to interview those who had been liberated from communist jails and camps. Their conclusions were very cautious, as they noticed that in fact Chinese techniques had not converted many people, and the majority of the people were just converting or pretending to have been converted to get out of the torturing and to get out of the jail, obviously. So the torturing and the mistreatment in jail had not really persuaded the individuals to change their perception. They were also criticized for their psychoanalytic approach, and in the case of Lifton, for a libertarian idea of human agency that later led him to support the anti-cult movement. However, they maintained that Chinese mental manipulation techniques either worked in a very limited number of cases when they were accompanied by the use of mind-altering drugs and torture. So that's like, they're sending electrical pulses to your brain. They're altering your mind with the use of LSD, drugs, and a whole list of psychedelic ingredients and drugs, I imagine, and it did not work at all, they say. The CIA, however, decided to present the thesis that people did not convert freely to communism in much simpler black and white terms, claiming in its propaganda that both the Chinese and Soviet communists had developed an infallible technique to change the ideas of their victims, like a vinyl disc was changed on a phonograph. The CIA instructed one of its agents, whose cover job was that of a journalist, Edward Hunter, to invent and spread the word brainwashing, presenting it as the translation of an expression allegedly used by the Chinese. In fact, the CIA and Hunter had taken the concept of brainwashing from the novel 1984 by George Orwell, where Big Brother washes clean the brains of the citizens of a fictional regime modeled after Soviet Russia. We're living in a movie. The idea that communists in China and Russia and communist spies in the West had mastered the techniques of brainwashing became immensely popular. We can see its triumph in popular culture in the 1959 novel The Manchurian Candidate and its 1963 movie version starring Frank Sinatra and Angela Lansbury. Soon, however, the CIA itself had to admit that brainwashing did not work. But they needed the funding, right? That's how they get their money. Experimenting. Dr. Donald Ewan Cameron, person that was right here in my own town doing lobotomies on kidnapped adopted children. In the previous chapter, we saw how CIA propaganda created the word and a theory of brainwashing to explain why intelligent people might embrace such an absurd doctrine as communism was, and to accuse the Soviet and Chinese communists of sinister practices, depriving their victims of their own free will. Paradoxically, the CIA came to believe in its own propaganda, and it actually tried to replicate the communist brainwashing in its own experiments. The MK-Ultra project, the CIA's secret brainwashing project, was codenamed the MK-Ultra project. Originally, it was only mentioned in a handful of publications critical of the U.S. government and often dismissed as supporting conspiracy theories, of course. Later, however, the CIA became the defendant in several lawsuits filed by volunteers who had suffered permanent damages in the MK-Ultra experiments and their relatives. The most important of which resulted in a 1988 settlement through the lawsuits. Several key documents became public. That's when it started, in 1988. It was thus confirmed that to further its brainwashing experiments, the CIA had secured the cooperation of several leading American universities and scholars who were on the cusp of advanced research on behavioral sciences. Not all of them were fully aware of the ultimate aims of the project, and the CIA hid under these foundations that were allegedly private. The first results were not encouraging. Each research team adopted one or more specific methods, such as hallucinogenic drugs, psychotropic medications administered in higher than normal doses, of course, sensory deprivation, repeated electroshock treatments, lobotomies, and many other forms of psychosurgery and hypnosis. Some of the volunteers were prison inmates, others were psychiatric patients, and of the researchers, homeless citizens who had been promised significant amounts of cash. The CIA took a quality leap with Donald Ewan Cameron, a distinguished Scottish psychiatrist, madman, who was professor of psychiatry at McGill University in Montreal. Joined the effort, Cameron will later become president of the American Psychiatric Association and found World Psychiatric Association in a protracted series of experiments on his Canadian patients. He combined many of the techniques that had formerly been tested separately. The CIA also appreciated that Cameron was working in Canada, thus circumventing legal restrictions forbidding such experiments in the United States. That's how they were doing it right here, not far from me in Franklin, Quebec, the Doria Institute. Cameron was living just across the border. There was a tunnel there leading to where he lived, and he would also cross over with his children and the kidnapped children, so that relieving the responsibility of any project being done to children, because they were actually hiding from the United States and fleeing into Canada. Okay, I'm totally blown away by what they're studying in the U.S., in schools, universities, institutes. Have you ever heard of the Max Planck Florida Institute for Neuroscience? Understanding the functional organization of the nervous system, its capabilities and capacity to produce perceptions, thoughts, language, memory, emotion, and action remains the ultimate challenge for biology, they say. Meeting this challenge requires forging links between different levels of analysis, genetic, molecular, cellular, circuit, behavioral, and developing new technologies that make cutting-edge scientific discoveries possible. Let's look at a few to finish off this amazing podcast. I thought it was very interesting. These are all bits of information in this podcast that I got from 7 or 8 different websites, including theblackvault.com, and now in all these neuroscience universities and secret private, well, not secret, but private institutions, guys, that are raising billions of dollars to do this secret experimentation and study of the human brain. Each lab focuses on one research area. One of the labs, the disorders of neural circuit function. The research in the Bolton lab employs electrophysiological and imaging techniques to study alterations in circuit structure and function in mouse models of neurological and psychiatric disorders. The functional architecture and development of cerebral cortex. Research in the Fitzpatrick lab utilizes state-of-the-art in vivo imaging techniques to probe the functional synaptic architecture of circuits in the brain in primary visual cortex. The neural dynamics and cognitive functions. The main goal of Inagaki lab is to develop a cellular and network level understanding of how internal states of the mind, such as internal drives and urgency, modify dynamics in the frontal cortex to influence cognitive functions. Holy crap. Okay? Oh my goodness. Chills. I've never really looked into each of the programs. I've only talked about them in general, or looked at them over in general, as a whole. But looking into each of these programs and what they did and how this information came out because they got caught doing these things is pretty incredible. And this, what I just read about Max Planck in Florida, the Institute, it's not hiding at all. It's, you can get hired to go and work there, but the work that they're doing, are you serious? Why are there so many institutions trying to understand the brain? So they're literally visualizing your brain on a computer monitor, on a screen, and seeing all the different circuits and the way the electricity is moving around inside the cortex to try to manipulate it for their own means. Scary stuff. Thanks for listening, everyone. If you enjoy these podcasts, thanks for listening in. You can leave me a comment if you have the time, or maybe just a thumbs up, or especially just come back and watch the next ones. Thanks again, everyone.